Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. So here's a video to go along with today's lesson. And today we took our first look at files and file handling. So what we're going to do today is we're going to learn how to open files, how to read from them, how to write from them, or write to them I guess. And as well as I'm going to introduce the first file assignment. So let's get started. So anyways, I got a new file here, right? New program. And if we're going to be working with files, we need to have a file to work with. So you can see here I got my Python folder open, and we're going to use this B-movie script as our file as an example today. And this is actually going to be the file that we work with for our first assignment as well. So you can see it's a good old script file. It's got a whole bunch of text in it, and in Python we can work with any kind of file type as long as it's something that you can open up in a text editor and it looks normal. Okay? So that means that we don't have to work with just text files. We can work with CSV files, RTS files, even Python files or Java files. As long as you can open up in a text editor, this works. So let's start off. This is the file that we're going to want to open, and so first thing we need to do is we need to open that file. So I'm going to make a new variable called file, and it's going to be open, and we need to give the file name that we want to open. There's two ways that we can do this. So let's go back and look at this file. I'm just going to open up its properties, and we can either just give the file name and its extension. The extension can be found here. This is a text file, so it'll be .text or txt. This is the name. But that only works if we're working in the same folder as the main program that we're working with. If this file is in a different location, we then need to give the full path length of where it is. And the way you get that is you can go to security here, and at the very top where it says object name, this is the full path of where that file is. So we're going to actually use that. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put it into a string just like that. And this won't quite work on its own. We need to put a little R right up front. And this says that it is a raw string, which means that it's not going to try to edit it. It's going to use this exactly as it's shown. Because remember that when we're using regular text or regular strings, we have special characters like -n for the end of line character. And that's kind of what it's trying to look at. When it's reading this, it sees all of these backslashes and it's thinking, oh, there's all sorts of special characters in here. But if you try to actually read it that way, it's going to generate an error. So that's what this little R is doing up front. It's saying don't do any kind of editing to this string. Use it exactly as it appears. We also then need to set the mode that we want to open this in. And so it defaults to read mode, but you can also do it manually by putting in a little R there. It needs to be in as a string, just like that. So R for read mode. And yeah, so that opens up the file. Next thing that we want to do is we'd probably want to read it and see what's inside of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do print, and then we're just going to read this file. File.read. Just like that. And last thing we need to do for every file is we need to close it. Just like that. And this will make sure that the file is properly closed and make sure that it doesn't get corrupted or anything if we're like in the middle of reading it or writing it or anything like that. You want to make sure that all your files are properly closed when you're done with them. And that's how we do it. So those 3 lines are all we need, and this should then read in that file and print it to the console. So let's try it out. Name it test. And we got the squeeze text because it tried to print a lot of things, but if we open it up, there we go. We got the entire B-movie script. We just read it in, just like that. Looks pretty good. So what if we don't want to read in the entire thing? What if we just want to read in one line? Well, we can do read line instead. And that will just read in the first line. And then we can say, okay, what if we want to print read line again? It'll read into the second line. Okay? So when you're doing this, reading line by line, there's a position that is being kept where you are in that file. And so when you read line, it's remembering where you were, and it'll read the next line after that. In this case, it only prints out the first line because the second line has nothing in it. If we look at the text file, right at the top, if we can get to the top, there we go. You can see the second line and the third line are actually have nothing in it. So that's why we didn't see anything. If we did it again, they would print this line, and then the fourth line it would print would be that line. Alright? So that is what readline does. And if you want to go back to the beginning of a file, you can do this. File.seek 0. And that will send it back to the beginning of the file. So if I actually move this right there, it's going to read the first line, it's going to go back to the beginning, and then it's going to read that line again. There we go. So that is what seek does. It used to be able to move you around within the file, but it's been depreciated. And so the only thing that it still can do is it can send us back to the beginning of a file. So if you're need to read through a file a couple times, you probably should never need to do that. But if you do, that is how you can get back to the beginning of the file without having to close it and open it up again. Alright, so that is the second way that you can read from a file. And the last way I'm going to show you is in a for loop. So you can say for line in file, and we'll just print line. And what that will do is you'll loop through the entire file, line by line, and print it out line by line. So if we run this, it will do it again. And now you can see that it's going line by line and printing it all out. So let's interrupt execution because this is going to go for a while. I said execute, stop it. There we go. Alright. So that is how you can read from the file. I like using this method, the for loop, because I typically work line by line in a file. But if you need to just read in a single line, or if you're just need to read it all in at once, that's an option as well. But this is the way I typically do it. Yeah. Let me also show you that this will work. I don't actually need to give the entire thing. I can just give the local path because my file is in the same location as the text file I'm looking for. So doing it this way would work fine as well. See, it can still open up the file, no problems. Restart shell. But if this file was somewhere else, then I would need to give that full path length. That looks like that. Alright? So, now let's talk about the modes. So, currently this is only in read mode, which means I cannot write to it. So, we have a total of 4 different modes that we're going to work with. If you open it in read mode, you're allowed to read it, but you're not allowed to write to the file. If you want to open this file in write mode, you put in a W, that W for write, and this will allow us to write to the file, but it won't allow us to read the file. There is also append. What this will do is it's kind of like write. It will only allow you to write to the file, but append won't erase everything that's currently in the file when you write to it. If you open it in write mode, if there's something already in that file, it's going to erase all of it and just start anew. If you open it in append mode, then it's going to add on to the end of that file and not erase everything that's inside of it already. Finally, there is read-write mode that allows you to read and write. It's called R+, and that allows you to read and write from the file. Typically, you don't do that though. Typically, you're only either reading from the file, writing to the file, or appending to a file. So try not to read and write to the file, because they can kind of interact with each other in weird ways. But those are the 4 ways that we can do that. So let's open this in read mode again. And I'm going to make a new file. It's called file2. We're going to open it up. And what I want to do is I want to copy the B-movie script into my new file. And that's how I'm going to show you how to write. Because there's only really one way to write to a file. And it works the same way every time. So I'm going to open it up. I need to give the new file a name. It doesn't matter if it exists or not. So I'm just going to call it new file. And if I don't give it a path, it's going to generate this file in the same location as the program. So you can see here, I do not have any file named new file here. There's nothing in there called new file. And there's going to be a text file. So new file.txt, and I'm going to open it in write mode, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write to file2. So file2, and this is how you write. You just go write, and inside the brackets you put the thing that you want to write to the file, and it needs to be a string. Every time that you read or write to a file, it's always as a string. Kind of like when we're getting input from the user. Input from the user always starts off as a string. Reading and writing to a file is always a string. So if you need it to be something else, you need to do that conversion on your own. And you need to do the associated error handling with it. Speaking of error handling, when you're opening a file like this also should have some error trapping on it. You might say, why? Why do I also need to error trap this? What could go wrong? Well, especially when you're trying to read from a file, what happens if that file doesn't exist? If you try to open a file that doesn't exist and try to read from it, you're going to get an error. That's why you need to error catch that, because you never know if that file actually exists. It's independent of your program. And so you need to make sure that you kind of error handle anything that is external from your program that could cause issues. So just like how we need to error trap input from the user in case if they give us bad inputs, we need to error trap opening and working with files because we don't know if that file even exists. So I'm going to write, and what am I going to write? Well, I'm just going to write file.read. So I'm going to read in the first file. It's going to return a string, and that string is going to get written to file2. And just like file1, I need to close file2 as well. Just like that. So, we all saw that I do not have a file called new file yet. That's okay. When I open it up in write mode, it will create that file for me. So, let's run this thing. And I didn't have it print anything to the screen, so it's already done. But now let's go and take a look if we got anything new in here. Hey, look, there's a new file called new file. Let's open it up and see what's inside of it. Look at that! It's the B-movie script. And so there we go. We have just written this file. And so that is how you can write to a file. By just opening up the file that you want to write to, open it up in write mode, and then file2.write, and then whatever it is that you want to write inside of it. Remember that it has to be a string that you're writing to it. Can't be anything else. Yeah. And there's not really anything special to writing. It's just file2.write, but it has to be in write mode. if I try to write to this file, because it's in read mode, it won't allow me to do that. Or if I try to read from this file, it wouldn't allow me to do that either, because it's not in read mode. So depending on what mode you open it in, will dictate what you're allowed to do with that file. Okay? So that is the basics of reading and writing. Let's take a look at the assignment. So, here we are in D2L. And under Files and File Structures, you can see a B-movie knockoff. I told you that we're going to be using a B-movie script for our assignment. And so in this assignment, you'll be working with a text file containing a script for a B-movie. You must write a program that will accomplish the following. Number 0. Conduct a word count on the script and output how many words there are. Be sure to check that you are only counting words. The file contains numbers and punctuation that will affect your word count if you're not careful. And I gave a link to common string operations and methods because these will be useful here because you're going to need to do what we call sanitize your input to make sure that it is what you want it to be. We'll actually take a quick look at that file again, just so I can show you guys what I mean by stuff in there that's going to affect your word count. So you might just say, oh, I just need to split the entire string by spaces, and that will give me all the words. Thing is, there's stuff like this, like these dashes. Those are also separated by spaces, and if you just simply divide by spaces, you're going to say that that's a word. That's not a word. You see a lot of them. So if you're counting those as words, you're actually going to be off by a couple hundred. There's also numbers, like that. That's not a word. Don't want to include that either. So your word count should only include words. Next, conduct a unique word count of the script and output how many different words are present. Hint, sets do not contain duplicates. So it's not a common thing that we use, sets, but this is something that it is useful for. Because it doesn't contain any duplicates, it can get rid of any duplicates very quickly. This should also only count the number of unique words and not be affected by punctuation or capitalization. Which means that if one word is at the end of a sentence and so it has a period at the end, it should still be counted as the same word as one that appears in the middle of a sentence. Or if the capitalization is different, they should still be counted as the same word when you're counting how many unique words they are. Okay? 2. Make a knockoff script by replacing every instance of the following words to make a new script about a different creature. So you need to replace these words in the file with something else of your choosing. Bees, honey, nectar, berry, flowers, hive, pollen, and beekeeper. You should replace all words regardless of whether they're capitalized or not. And then finally, you're going to create a new file and write your knockoff script into it. And right-click and save the following to download the text file. So this is the text file that we're going to be working with. If you just left-click it, it will open it up and there's the text file that we see. But you need to right-click it and then save as. And then that's how you can get access to that file, so that you can use it. So that is the assignment that we're going to be working on, and this will be due sometime after spring break. So you guys got at least 2 weeks to get this done. This is not going to be part of the report card. So the last assignment that's going to be on the report card is the battleship assignment. This is going to be something new. So we're going to carry on from this. Next time, actually I'm going to show you one more thing before we finish. Just because it's kind of interesting. So I'm going to take my file here, and rather than opening up some text file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this file, the Python file. I'm going to have the program open itself up. And so I'm going to do this. I'm going to open up this file on its own. So this is called test. I'm going to open up test.py. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say the text is equal to file.read. So we're going to read in the entire file. And why don't we just print text as well, so that we can see that we're actually reading our program. And then we're going to close the file. So file.close. And then I'm going to open up the file again, but this time I'm going to open it up in append mode. So file.open, but I'm going to open it up in append mode. And then I'm going to write to the file text. So I'm going to write the file to itself, and then close. So open up the file, read the file, print it out to the screen, close the file, open up the file again in append mode, write the program back into itself, and then close. And let's see what this thing does. So save it, and it printed the program to the screen. So there we go. That's the program. But what we want to do is I'm going to reopen that file now. Oh, it didn't do the thing that I wanted. I wanted to append to the end of it, but or maybe it did. No, doesn't look like it did. But we can open up the file and we can read from it. I don't know why it didn't append nicely. Maybe we'll try that. I don't know if that's going to work. I guess I'm going to have to look into it. I did it once before, but anyways. Key thing here is that we don't have to just work with text files. We can work with our own program files. And that's going to be a key thing for when we take a look at making viruses when we come back from the spring break. So we're not going to make any dangerous viruses. They're only going to infect other Python files, but it'll give you an idea of how exactly they work. Alright, so that is everything I have for you today, and I will see you all on Wednesday. Have a good one.